Welcome to your daily huddle, Spiritual Matters Thursday. I'm your host, Dr. Monica Oganda. Today we're talking about how to begin your spiritual journey. And as you know, I am a fan of your daily huddle, Spiritual Matters Thursday. I'm your host, Dr. Monica. We have an echo, Giovanni.
Sorry.
Okay. And so what we want to do today is check your assumptions on that, okay? Because the question, how do I begin my spiritual journey, assumes that you were not on one and want to get one today. And I assert with you that you have always been on a spiritual journey because you are first a spiritual being having a human experience. Let's begin there. If you begin with the assumption that I'm already a spiritual being having a human experience, then I am already on my spiritual journey. But since we like stages and phases and organization and things like that to help us make sense of the world, I'll give you some stages. So think of the human life cycle, right? At first, you have this pregnancy and incubation period, and then you have labor and delivery, which hurls you into the next phase, which is your infancy and childhood. Okay, so we'll talk about infancy and childhood as being step one of your human life cycle. Okay, then step two is your adolescence. Track with me. Your adolescence is so from 0 to 7. You have your infancy. From 7 to 14, you have your childhood. From 14 to 21, you'll have your adolescence. And then from 21 to, I don't know, let's say 60, 65, whatever, you have your adulthood. It's the longest phase. And then you have your elderhood or old age or retirement or whatever you want to call it. And that's kind of like from being, the edad mayor, how do you say that in Spanish in English, right? So like your older age and facing your mortality and then transitioning to your next phase of living, all right? So we'll say infancy and childhood is stage 1, adolescence is stage 2, adulthood is stage 3, and old age / elderhood is stage 4. That's for your human life cycle, right? Your spiritual life cycle tracks the same way because as above, so below, as within, so without. We are mirror images of each other. That your lower nature mirrors your higher nature and vice versa. So the first stage in your spiritual, let's call it walk or awakening, whatever you want to call it, we'll call that the disillusionment, kind of like misalignment, like what's going on here? There's got to be something more than this. You start questioning things, you start noticing that things don't make sense, that things are misaligned, and you know that there's something more there, but you don't know quite how to put your finger on it. That's what I'm calling disillusionment, okay, or misalignment. And so a lot of times what happens is that you'll follow a certain script. If I do these things, if I go to college and I get a job and I get married and I have children, then I'll have a fruitful life and everything will be fine and everything's perfect and beautiful and da 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 da. And then you figure out somewhere along the line, oh, it doesn't work like that. How come it doesn't work like that? That's what I've been told. And now I'm figuring out that this is just a bunch of crap. That's the disillusionment I'm talking about. So then the second phase or the second stage of that spiritual journey is the idea of like asking questions, the idea of exploring and seeking and studying and reading and going to different churches, going to different foundational faiths and asking questions of other people with different traditions. And it's like you become this little researcher and you're trying different things to see if any of it makes any sense to you. And this is usually where philosophers rest. Because philosophers get really comfortable asking the questions and really comfortable with a sundry of answers. They're not attached necessarily to one particular answer or not. It's just the act of questioning is satisfying enough. So that's the second stage, is the questioning and the seeking, et cetera, et cetera. The third stage, we're going to call it the initiation, the dark night of the soul, if you will. And this is when it's like the answers that you were looking for outside do not make any sense to you, or you understand that there's something more than just what's outside, and you begin to seek within. There's some the external validation, it is no longer enough. The external answer is no enough. External questions no longer enough. There's stuff that just does not make any sense that anybody else can explain to you. You have to have your own lived experience of your own faith, of your own philosophy, of your own integration, and that is what we call the dark night of the soul, because nobody can go there with you but you. If you are well versed in the Christian tradition, this is when Jacob had that fight with the angel and said, "I will not let you go until you bless me." Metaphysically, that's you grappling with your own higher consciousness, because angels in the Bible represent messengers. So when you go through this dark night of the soul, when you go through this initiation of sorts, you kind of start to get your grounding. You start to get your integration of sorts. Things start to fall into place. Not that you have all the answers, not that now all of a sudden you are eliminated and nothing can bother you. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that you can now start to integrate the human aspect of you and the spiritual aspect of you. Because in the past, maybe you had it like it had to be one or the other. And now you understand that you are bilingual, that you are operating in two parallel timelines, or there are two tracks to your train, as it were. Right? And sometimes you go back and forth, and you can recognize it. You can recognize when you're fully in your divinity, in your intuition, in your power, and then you can recognize it when you're just being petty and egoic, and it's like, oh, there, but for the grace of God, go I. Right? And sometimes you judge yourself for it, or penalize yourself for it, or say this shouldn't be, etc. But at some point, you understand that you're navigating two languages. Right? Now, I don't know if any of you are familiar. Well, I know Giovanni is. Maybe virtual, I don't know. But those of us who speak more than one language, sometimes you get caught up, at least I do anyways, that sometimes I'll use the grammar or the naming syntax in Spanish. I'll use it in English, and when I say it in English, it doesn't make sense, and then I correct myself because I know that it doesn't sound aligned. It's like, oh no, that's not how you say it in English. Or vice versa. I'll say something in Spanish with the syntax or the grammar or the even pronunciation in English. And it's like, okay, that doesn't make sense in Spanish. So then you kind of self-correct in that way. And that's the same thing that happens with your human nature and your divine nature. There's some things that make perfect sense in your human nature that is completely unheard of in your divine. Let me give you an example. If I say to you, for example, no, I'm not going to give of myself to this person because this person is not giving of themselves. So I'm going to withdraw my love. We don't say that consciously because that sounds rude, but that's what we say energetically. I'm not going to give of my love to this person because I don't feel like they're giving themselves. So I'm going to protect the little love that I have. I'm not going to give it to you because you're being stingy with yours. Now, would the divine part of you say that? No. You already know that when you're operating from the like tit for tat thing, you're operating from ego, you're operating from your humanity. And so when you can catch yourself in those things, then you're at a choice point of who do you say that you are? Just like Jesus asked Peter, the faith faculty in the Bible. You get to decide who you say that you are in every single moment. Are you operating from your divine nature or are you operating from your ego nature? Not that there's a right or wrong answer, but it is a choice that you get to make. And the more frequently and consistently that you make that choice, the more that you identify yourself with that part of you. That's why sometimes people say, yeah, because, I want to seek my higher self, as though they have a higher self, but who they really are is this limited, egoic human being versus somebody who has an ego, because who they really are is this divine, limitless, made in the image and likeness of God, being, right? So the first place where you want to look in terms of where you're standing and where you are in your own spiritual journey is how you speak. How you speak, who's speaking? How do you speak about the nature of the world, about your nature, who you say that you are, who other people are in relation to you, and your power in the world? Some of us operate as though we do not have any power in the world and we're just kind of a squirrel trying to get a nut. And then other of us speak as though we are the authors of our own experience, and everything that happens in the world, when we notice it, especially when we are emotionally influenced by it, is either a reflection or a projection of our own mind. Not like one of them is true and one of them is false. It's a powerful place to stand based on what you've decided that you're going to be and where you are in your spiritual journey. I know it's just like the human life cycle, infancy and childhood is very limited, very short, and adolescence is also very short. Some would say adolescence is probably the shortest one. Adulthood is super long, right? It takes decades. You're an adult for a very, very long time. In the same way, in your spiritual walk, right? That disillusionment, that misalignment is a relatively short period of time. Relatively, depending on how young your soul is. That's another sermon for another Sunday. And that dark night of the soul can also be very short, depending on your levels of resistance, right? But the integration aspect of it, the ways in which you formulate your own philosophy, the layers of maybe trauma that you're unpacking or assumptions that you're dissolving, or the way that you integrate these philosophies, the way that you evolve and the way that you show up in the world, that one is the longest one, just like adulthood is the longest one in your biological age. And you get to the point where it's at-one-ment or contribution that's representing like the old age. And at that point, you're like, I have nothing left to prove. I have nothing left to fight for. Not because I don't have any fight in me, but because I recognize that all is really well. All is well with my soul, as the song says. And then you begin this level of like acceptance and of what people would call unconditional love. So I am curious if you were to analogize, I don't know. If you were to use the stages of human life cycle development, infancy, childhood, adolescence, adulthood, old age, to your spiritual development, where would you say you are? Are you still a teenager? Or are you still a child? Are you still doing baby things? Still like, what are we talking about? Let's check in. Where are you? Yes, Giovanni.
So, what I was thinking as you were sharing, I lost signal for a little bit on one of the stages.
Okay.
Um, but what was being triggered was the illusion of growing up.
Mm-hmm.
Um, someone, I don't know, someone said, or socially acceptable, the notion of growing up, like you're a grown up. Like, wow, you're 18 or you're 21 or you're 25 or you're 35 or you're 40 or you're old. Like the illusion of a grown up is what I'm present at the stages of spirituality and also at the stages of my life. I don't,
Mm-hmm.
I'm discovering in this conversation that may be different. Maybe I have gone from one stage of awareness to the second stage of awareness, if you will.
Okay.
But to say I have grown up puts the ceiling on the opportunity that my life is.
Mm.
And so if you would have asked me 5 days ago, 5 days or 5 days ago, do you feel like a spiritually conscious human being? I would have said, oh my gosh, man, if you would, I would going through this journey of, or and through this conversation of how much I have expanded and grown and how amazing I am without saying it.
Mm-hmm.
And then 3 days later, I have this royal mess in my life created by me
Created
where
by you. Uh-huh.
where I feel I haven't grown at all spiritually. Like I feel myself inside of this dark side of the soul. What did you call it? The dark
Yeah,
side,
yeah. The dark night of the soul.
dark night of soul, discovering my life again,
Mm-hmm.
discovering journey again, discovering spirituality again. And that's what I'm present, that the illusion of being grown up or spiritually aware is what I'm
Yeah.
hearing this conversation.
Oh, that's really good, Giovanni. Let me tell you what I hear in what you're saying. Sometimes we have it like they're linear stages. Like when if you're an adult, then that means that you're no longer a child, right? That if you're an old age, then you're no longer an adult. Now you're just an old person. But what I'm going to suggest is that they're actually stackable bricks. You bring your childhood with you, you bring your adolescence with you into adulthood, you bring your adulthood into old age. So there's like a full building by the time that you're in old age, you're bringing all of that with you. You don't leave them behind. Um, the face that you present is a little different, right? So that when you're in old age, for example, you may have more wrinkles, you may have gray hair, etc. But there's a child still within. There's still a rebellious teenager. There's still a productive, useful, quote unquote, member of society that's an adult. But the face that you present may be a little bit different. So when I hear what you're saying in terms of like, yeah, I would have said that I'm in my spiritual kind of like adulthood, maybe
I'm
maturity. But
enlightened.
yeah, but now everything's gone to shit, and now I don't know what to do, and now maybe I'm a child again. All right. Yeah, because it's all in there, right? And it's an iterative process, right? That it's like every year we learn something, or every day, every moment we learn something new about ourselves. We discover something new about the world. And so it's not linear like that. If it were linear like that, we could understand the frustration. It's like, oh, I thought I was supposed to be done with this lesson. But you don't get done with lessons. You go deeper into them and you discovered layers of them more so than anything else. So this dark night of the soul is just the next iteration of the powerful being that you already are and that you're discovering yourself to be. That's my take on it.
Yeah, I'm gonna get Rashida in the conversation. She had her hand up.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
also one of the things that I'm very present in this moment of my life that you often say is my divinity doesn't transcend my humanity doesn't transcend my divinity, or somewhere like that.
Mm-hmm.
It has given me some access to peace of mind in that stacking that you're pointing to.
Yeah. Yes. Your
Go
divinity
ahead.
does not exempt you from your humanity,
Exempt you, exempt you.
and your humanity does not diminish your divinity. Rashida, what you got?
Diminish.
Thank
Wow.
you. Thank you so much, Dr. Ogando. When you started the conversation, for me was a question and also direct direct to able to understand that I that the journey that I've been for the I would say is all my life. When I got to understanding and comprehending and living my spiritual life, it was a awakening in my life, and also a consciousness. And why I say that is because in every time I goes into fasting for the 40 days, it's like how I born again.
Mm-hmm.
And when I say it's born again, spiritually, morally, physically, but more, I have a vision completely different than when I started the first day
Mm-hmm.
to the to when I'm getting to the end of my 40 days. I
Mm-hmm.
see people different. I see myself different in the mirror. And the other question is that you ask what stage I am, if I am in my teenage life, I'm in my adult. I will say I have I will say is a mindset that I want to stay into that 20, early 20s.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I don't want to be there because in what I went through in my 20s, I don't want to go through it when I'm 64. Come on.
Mm-hmm.
It's not logic. But conveniently, I would love to stay into my 20s. Or I feel
Mm-hmm.
as young as I want to feel, depend on my day.
Yeah.
And when I say that living my spirituality, my spiritual life, is that I understand and comprehend more my peers and also who encounter with me. I have learned and it's make me, I was like, is that person just say that? Can you repeat yourself? And they will be like, oh, I say, why do you think that way? But it's my consciousness and my level of spirituality that understood a different message that they given me. So yes, I like the conversation because it's put me to think and it put me to resonate with just that persona, that spirit. I'm not talking about the body. I'm not talking about the physical. Trust me. I'm talking about the awakening in that deep source of
Mm-hmm.
spirituality. So
Mm-hmm.
thank you so much. And Joanny, I love your face. When she started the conversation, I was like, okay, I would love to go into his mind and say, what is he thinking? What is he thinking? What is he? He was like, oh my goodness, you have a beautiful estamina. And he was like, where she taking me? Where I'm going with her? So thank you so much, Dr. Ogando. Thank you so much,
Absolutely.
Giovanni.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that. That's awesome.
Thank you,
Stan,
Rashida.
Stan, you have something?
Yes, good morning, Mastermind family, Daily Huddle family. I was thinking about, I like to think about it this way. I like to think about it that I'm living life like on a graph curve, but the curve does have an upward trajectory. That is sometime I'm here at this point, then I may
Mm-hmm.
down to this point, but then I
Mm-hmm.
go up higher to this point, and then I may drop down sometime, but that the curve is at least on an upward
Word flow.
trajectory, an upward slope. And
Mm-hmm.
I believe that's the way it is with everybody who's seeking a line, that's seeking higher consciousness and asking questions, showing up here, doing things like that. We all are on that type of trajectory. And I think we need to think about it that way sometime to keep ourselves encouraged. We are going to go down, but we do have an upward trajectory. The other thing I want to ask, is it really bordering on the line of conceit or going over, stepping into that area to think that each one of our lives is living so in a way such that we could be Christed?
Mm-hmm. 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 So here's something that you're bringing up for me, Stan, and that is that, ooh, I don't know if I have enough time. Just like trees, right? Above the soil, trees are phototropic. They grow towards the light, right? Below the surface, trees are geotropic. They grow towards gravity. They grow towards the center of the earth, right? And in the same way, our nature, because again, as above, so below, our nature is that there are certain parts of our consciousness that grow towards the light, that grow towards that, what you're saying, that higher consciousness. But in order for that to be sustainable, you're going to have deep roots. You're going to have to be okay with your shadow. You're going to have to be okay with digging deep roots into the darkest parts of you, which is beneath the surface. Working with your subconscious, working with the shadow nature, working with what people call evil, right? But if you look at the word evil, it's just live backwards. It's just live backwards, right? And so in the same way, you're going to have to, like the Buddhists talk about, sit in your paradoxes, sit in your oxymorons, in your supposed contradictions. So while, yes, there's an upward slope, absolutely, above the surface, there is an upward slope. And below the surface, there's a downward slope. Because otherwise, you wouldn't be able to sit it, right? You're going to have, if you look at the fulcrum from the laws of physics perspective, a fulcrum can only grow as high as the foundation that it's sitting on. If the foundation is flimsy, it'll just tip over, right? And so one of the things that I find is incomplete in the conversation of spiritual walk and spiritual journey. People talk a lot about this love and light and kumbaya and can we all just get along, and that's fine. But in order for you to be the angel that you think that you are, you're going to have to be okay with the monster that you're afraid that you are. You're going to have to face those shadows. That's why, you see what I'm saying? That we don't have enough time. You see what I'm saying? Okay. So I'm going to say this. I'm going to say, in terms of your development, that, Giovanni was talking about, like, leaving certain phases behind. And this goes back into that whole conversation of atonement, integration, is that we are integrating childhood and adolescence into our adulthood. We're stacking it. In the same way, we are integrating the shadow aspects, the limited aspects, into our infinity. And so I'm going to leave you with this conversation of the parts of you that you still feel guilty about, ashamed of, embarrassed about, uninterested in, that you judge it, that you like, I should be done with this already. Why are you here? Why are you coming along like a pesky little sister or brother? What are those parts of you that you are not fully pleased with, fully proud of? And what are they here to teach you? Because maybe that part of you that you judge, they're like, oh my God, why am I so petty? Why am I so like, I just noticed all the little details and everything just bothers me. Maybe that attention to detail is the way that you can use it as a devotion to excellence and mastery. There are parts of you that you haven't fully integrated that are actually here to chisel you, not to bother you, to grow you, not to throw a monkey wrench in your operation. Our grief, our despair, our sadness, our resentment, those are all emotions that we are not okay with feeling. We just want to get back to the happy place, like drug addicts. And so, but what is our grief? What is our sadness? What is our despair? What's our disappointment here to teach us? What gifts does it bring? Because I promise you, just like the human body, if you didn't need that particular organ, it would just become a vestigial organ and eventually it will go away. Like your appendix. Your appendix used to be a tail. Did you know that? And you don't need tails anymore. Because you have opposable thumbs, so now you can stand on your own without needing the balance of a tail. Again, another sermon for the Sunday. But in the same way that your human body has vestigial organs that it no longer needs, and it becomes something else, like an appendix, in the same way, perhaps you don't need rage or anger or despair anymore to fight for justice. Now you just need an elevated consciousness, but you still have those sparks of a warrior inside of you. Use that instead of judging it and isolating it because you're embarrassed by it. Okay, I've talked to your ear long enough. Thank you for being with us. I appreciate you. Remember to live and laugh and love and eat more plant-based, rest less, exercise, get your sleep. Twerk is a Kundalini raising exercise.
Spiritual exercise.
Get at least 7 to 9 hours of sleep, and of course, audit.